Hello everyone, welcome to Nebula4 Lab. We're gonna talk about TAIPEI by London Acoustics. So we're here for another episode, one of the first reviews of our kind, and since these plugins just got out yesterday and got patched today in 24 hours, I thought we would probably want to start with something that is incredibly new, right? So first and foremost, how does it look and how does it look when it sounds? Because we like to take a look at stuff rather than hearing it. So that's the interface, really cool. And we got preset, we got rec level, and then we got playback level. These would be the three things that probably wouldn't scare us. Then there's on the bottom ATR and RTM, that's a tape brand. Then there's a tape formula, red or silver, so that's obviously tape formula. Then we have an operating mode, which is multi-track, simulating probably some kind of 16-track tape machine, or master, which is a 2-track. And then we have noise reduction, and we have tape phase on or off, which, you know, kind of takes into account more of the phasey issues that tape would have, and that we managed to solve by removing tape from the recording process and mixing and mastering, and now we're bringing it back because we miss it. So in the middle, I think there's the most sort of unique way of approaching tape for this plugin, and I just opened it yesterday, so it's fairly new, and it's as new for me as it is for you probably. We have a lows quality, we have a high sat character, I would say, speed in IPS in the middle, lows, highs, and bias calibration. So bias calibration would be pretty cool because we already know how it works from other tape plugins. But everything in the middle is in red. So because it's in red, it's probably important. It looks to me as if lows quality goes from cheap to expensive and has a default sort of in the middle. The expensive would probably be sort of like a cleaner, deeper lows, I would assume. I haven't even read the manual, that's how beautiful this is. And cheap would probably be some sort of like tape cassette or sort of like Studer, Revox stuff that people used to bring around. They're getting back in popularity a lot. Then there's a high saturation character, so how, you know, the highs get saturated. Vintage, clear, I would say, or default in the middle. Then again, the speed, finally, 7.5, 15, and 30, which is the IPS, inches per second, which is a typical, one of the most important parameters for tape. And then we have lows and highs, which I would assume it's some sort of EQ. I tried it, it doesn't quite sound like it's an EQ post tape, so it's kind of cool that it's working in conjunction with how the tape machine reacts. So it would be probably something we would calibrate in the machine itself, which is something that happens in a lot of plugins by other companies as well. There are two LEDs in and out, which blink green when, you know, saturation is in the ballpark, and red when you're doing it too much. But the coolest thing that you might have already noticed, but I hadn't at first glance yesterday, was that there are 3 triangles that are placed in high sat character, in lows, highs, and in speed IPS. So whenever you see a blue triangle, it's the appropriate setting for 15, for example. When you see an orange one, is the appropriate setting for 30, and when you see a green one, it's the appropriate setting for 7.5. So to keep things into good faith of representing what tape would really sound, when we switch tape to the green color, which is 7.5, we should, if we wanted to keep things, you know, on par with reality that they sampled, go and move all the knobs to the corresponding triangles, which is the first thing I tried and the first thing I broke away from, because sometimes you don't want things to sound exactly as they should be, you just want things to sound good. So the other thing that I really like is that this thing is moving, and it's one of the first times that a Nebula sort of inspired library is moving with the sweep that we're sending to it. So there's a left to right discrepancy, which is good. There's a lot of noise, which is good. I wonder what happens if I go noise reduction on. Who knows, you know? What if I switch it? All right, hold on, we're doing it. So it actually changes some of the curve. Probably, I mean, we're sending minus 2.83, so it is quite a lot. I wonder what happens if we go explore the bottom pits of doom around minus 60, there's a little bit of a 5 hertz thing. It's kind of, could be, yeah, from, you know, the real unit. What happens if we just bring it there? All right, reduce noise reduction. It probably is going to affect something. Looks mostly as if we have a sort of a bump coming back up when we toggle the noise reduction off. But, you know, what if we engage tape phase? Ooh, tape phase messes up all the 2 to 5K thing. So, you know, it's probably gonna differentiate the left-right channels a little bit more, but this again is a static one, you know, full spectrum signal we're sending there. Let's try and not destroy this tape machine. Let's try and go here. Now, when we do this, we go to master mode or we go back to multitrack. We see that like the multitrack is moving, but the master track, you see sometimes what happens, I moved back to master, we no longer have that incredibly flat kind of response. Let's try that again. So it's two things. It partly comes from plugin doctor. It partly comes from Nebula switching stuff around. So sometimes it doesn't react. So, but they're both moving in a way that it looks like they have it pretty much on a similar level. Obviously, the master I tried, it kind of sounds more like it's capable of, you know, bearing a full mix. ATR and RTM. All right. So this one just generates that. I still have doubts that this will be faithful to what we're having because it doesn't quite look like RTM and ATR should be this different, but maybe yes. Tape formula. So red is definitely brighter than silver, although silver kind of looks like has a little bit of a bumpier low end. Maybe, maybe not. So you see now sometimes things are disappearing. I think that these kind of different behavior that we're seeing comes from the fact that this library has been made with a Nebula, as far as I heard, that has not been released yet. So that could be the reason. But, you know, it's late night, it's Thursday, we can do it. It's okay. What if we crank preset? Things explode. Perfect. What if we uncrank preset? All right, things move here. What if we crank rec level? All right, so rec level is not linear. We increase level, but we are bumping things up more towards the low frequencies or sort of like biasing the highs together. So the highs kind of don't bump as much as the lows and low mids. That's great. What if we calibrate bias differently? All right, this I would expect from sort of a biasing mechanism in a plugin, which is good. And playback level is sort of linear, yeah. This would probably be the most linear sort of output volume. That's okay. What happens if I move this from 30 to 15 or 7.5? Things don't quite change that much, or we have a little bit of lows that go away. But what if we move lows up? All right, so lows and highs are a little bit more of a bump. 50 hertz bump, or actually 45. So this is sort of a 1/4 inch kind of thing. In my experience, 1/4 inch tape has a very nice sort of way of bumping things, and we could emulate that with the lows. Very good to know. What is these highs here? This is way over sort of 10K or anything. It's funny how we haven't heard anything so far. I think, you know, should keep thinking about that. Lows quality. All right, so lows quality actually affects the highs. Ha! Tried and play a trick on us, but we found out. So expensive would actually be more in the realm of having a more faithful kind of tape behavior, which might not be what we want. And cheap would be like we only have highs, lows, and we don't have highs, which actually reflects when you had cassettes, would be the high frequencies that would actually die the fastest or not even get recorded depending on the status of your recorder. The high sat is increasing this and then decreasing with vintage, but I gotta say this looks really like an EQ. We'll try it out. It doesn't translate to 100% equalization, which I think is a great thing. So this is fantastic. that's pretty much everything, right? If we probably saturate things a little bit and bump them up, and then we switch tape. All right, now we see it. So all of the settings that we switch to actually have a different way of bumping frequencies here. So this is pretty elaborate, and pretty cool. I would say that for being Bad Hair Day, I mean, this is kind of cool. And again, you know, who needs to hear how it sounds, right? If it looks good. Harmonics, we don't even want to look at that because that's, you know, noise. We're sending such a strong level down here. Let's try and lower it down here, and let's try and send a 1K as we would do with the tape machine. Okay, that's kind of cleaner. What if we move to 30? Okay, harmonics don't change. What if we go to red? All right, red is definitely cleaner, and RTM is on par, I would say, with ATR. What if we go to multi-track, as I would expect? Okay, well, it's not. I was expecting much more. All right, what if we go noise reduction? Looks kind of cleaner. I mean, no, it's still minus 175. It's good, you know, looking pretty good. What if we switch here and we engage lows and highs and we go cleaner? Obviously, I mean, the harmonic content changes. That's what we would, you know, expect. I wouldn't go into anything else, honestly, that much. The important stuff that I would go around here is that when you go edit, something that in the current version you should keep an eye on, because this library does not have a different sample rates at which it was captured. It only has one sample rate. Maybe you want to, because of the controls that it has, take a look at the fact that we have a frequency, a source frequency of 44.1 kilohertz going into a 44.1 kilohertz session, which is appropriate. If you read 96 going into 44.1, it's probably not loading the frequency, the sampling that is appropriate to the convolution that it should do. So that happens with Nebula, and I have a sort of a partial solution to this, which might help or not, but you know, you could take a look at that. So we close this and we go to streaming, and here you see my hard drive into the Acoustics VST plugins folder, and there's obviously the plugins that I have installed. Now, every plugin that we called, in this case N4 TAIPEI T.dll, has an XML file. So the DLL is the actual plugin, the VST, and the XML is the sort of spreadsheet or data, you know, configuration file that you can see here on the right. There is a parameter called fast boot, which is set to 1, which helps to set to 0 oftentimes. This will make the loading of the library a little bit slower, but it will ensure that at the current state of Nebula, Nebula takes its time to read what the session sample rate is and grabs the sampling that is appropriate one-to-one to the sample. So if you were at 88.2, it picks 88.2, and so on and so forth, if the library has it. So usually, I've been putting fastboot to 0 in any local tweak. If you haven't, you know, gotten into all the setup tweaks and stuff, there's a video for that. But that's pretty much what I would recommend to you. So now we can go into Studio One and maybe hear how this sounds, because that could be a cool idea. So as usual, what have I done here is I've set up the 3 tracks, source, process 1, and process 2. And I haven't still tried TAIPEI here on this track. You heard this band, it's sway, it's borderline, it's kind of a darker kind of vibe. And I want to hear how this sounds now. What else? We're probably going to just use gray and orange. So, you know, we're just going to switch this. Let me set it up in a way that I would kind of like it at first. I would go 15. I would move to all of the 15 settings. Or actually, you know what? Let's keep it as it would be. ATR, red, multi-track, no noise reduction, no tape phase. This is just the default when you open it. And let's hear what happens when you instantiate this plugin over the source, right? It's louder, and it cannot be louder because it will fool us. So what we will do is we're probably, for the sake of our comparison, try and use a fader, just a normal fader, to sort of like get in the ballpark. Let me go to first chorus. You can change the shape of things to come. It's kind of 3.5 dB difference, so that's kind of, you know, a lot. But if it is saturating the way it should, it's probably gonna give us, you know, a little bit of that. So if you like a default, I would probably just go here on the playback level and lower this to make it a default for you, so that when you instantiate that, you don't have a volume change. You know, just how I would do it. But we're sure that this playback level is linear, because it kind of looked like that, but we're not 100% sure. We would need to ask the developers, who are very secretive wizards that are usually visible to the human eye. They only reveal to you when they want. So for this reason, I've done it with a fader, which is 100% known to be clean, at least in DAWs. And 3.5, well, that's quite a lot. So let's go verse again, because there's a little bit more transience. Not bad. Like, it wasn't really 3.5, like when you really hear it around and, you know, when you kind of, you know, concentrate, I landed up at around -2.2, even if the saturation is there, settling down my ears, kind of. I'm listening at a very low level, kind of not super low, but, you know, I want this to really be coming at me so that I can hear it. There's a huge difference even at low volume. So, you know, if we would blast it super loud, we would probably even hear it less. But I'm gonna try and make a setup that kind of works for me, and I'm gonna use the last chorus. I hear it a little bit too crunchy for me, which isn't bad for a lot of people, but there's already a very kind of analog. I know how we made this record, and it's like really analog from the get-go, and there's a lot of outboard being used in mixing as well. I don't really need to like drench it into tape, so I would like to design something that is a little bit sophisticated and kind of makes the high mids come a little bit more forward and has that kind of expensive, you've been mastered by an expensive kind of Nashville studio in the 80s, you know. So once we get that time machine going, we can really, really make a record that is fantastic. Let's try it out. Everything here is a default. I already have a pretty good idea of what I want to do. I want to switch to master tape, obviously, because I don't want to keep it in master. I'm gonna hear it. Then I'm gonna go to record level and preset. I'm gonna make the lows a little bit more expensive. That's we balance it out. Switch it to 15. Play with the lows and highs, ending with the bias calibration, and then making sure that either tape phase is on or off, whatever, you know, at the very last stage. You know what I'm gonna do. Now I'm gonna really do it. All right, almost there, almost there. Let's get back to first chorus. There's not a lot of difference between master and multi-track at first, but there's a little bit more transient, faithful kind of thing. I think I'm gonna start cheating and break off from the 15 or 30 thing, because 30 I don't like for some reason, but I mean, I know the reasons why I don't like it. It's kind of there, and what it does, it's not enough, and in other areas it does it too much. And 15 is really woolly, and it's a dark mix. This is not a finished master, it's the mix that the band maybe signed off for vinyl or whatever, and I know it's a dark mix. So if this darkens it because of the beauty of tape losing highs, we're doomed. We're getting into even less highs. So I want to try and go the other way. That's why I'm bias calibrating and stuff. We're getting there. We're getting there. So now, because I moved from vintage to clear, the high saturation character is the main defining element for the highs. And so I immediately reset lows, highs, and bias calibration, because at that point I know that that is doing 90%, and then I'm going backwards. I'm gonna move lows quality just because we know that it kind of creates a little bit less highs, because now we have plenty, and we just moved it like 10%. Okay, I think I kind of like it this way. Let me hear the last chorus. Now we're gonna do without and with. Okay, I know you might be criticizing me of like, wow, I was just about to hear it and you stopped. All right, I'm gonna tell you why I stopped. I want you to understand that what I'm doing is already kind of drastic, but a lot of people, because of YouTube or whatever, they're monitoring the fact that, you know, we're getting all in a journey wagon and we're getting better and better every day. We don't always hear things the way somebody who did it for 60 years, you know, does. But listen to how the original now sounds muffled in a kind of a bad way, in the sense that you can't really hear the interplay of the musicians, who, by the way, recorded everything together, as much as you can actually in the tape version. So now we are using tape to detangle, to make things a little bit more intelligible and easier to translate. This is, to me, the reason why you would want to have a tape machine in your studio now, unless you want to use it for destroying people's mixes, which is fun, but might, you know, send you to jail one day. It is a great thing to actually send digital mixes to get detangled and by, you know, for whatever reason, actually cleaned. Tape would mess things up, but it doesn't as much as clean. If you use it right, it's capable of making things easier for our ear to understand. Now, this I really, really like. So now I'm gonna shut up. We're gonna take it from second verse, and we're gonna, maybe half of the song, and I'm just gonna do back and forth. right? So I think what I explained really works, and my interest is always that you don't need to use TAIPEI, you don't need to use my plugins, whatever. Just now you know, and this is what I want you to carry on with you for the rest of your lives. This is really what tape can do. The fact that you can do it with TAIPEI goes to the benefit of the quality of this plugin. I kind of like it. I could use this if I had only one tape plugin. That certainly is working. It has that forwardness factor. We crunched things. We then went back. You heard how when the singer says borderline, which is, you know, the hook and also the title of the song, there's just guitars and snare, and at that point it really needs to be free. The song really needs to be open up, and you have, because of the BPM, just to feel that rock snare going over the backbeat, and it's just like such a great feeling when that happens over the borderline, you know, the very last part of the word. It just, you know, it's fading out, and the snare just is very laid back and just, you know, kicking it into the end of the chorus. Rewind this video and just take a look at that. There's also, before the beginning of the second chorus, there is a left guitar that is so easier to hear, so much easier to hear with the tape on, because of the separation of the channels, of the detangling of the low mids and high mids, and it's just so enjoyable. You wouldn't want to go back to the source now, because it's so easy for your ear to kind of understand that. You can do it with a lot of plugins combined together, or you could do it back in the days. They didn't even know. They just put it through tape and they were like, wow, man, everything passing through this tape recorder just makes it into a record. It's like, I want to listen to this on repeat now. It's easier to translate to different hi-fis and different stuff. And it's the beauty of magnetism and black magic and the way that transformers and tubes and tape and, you know, ferrite or whatever, you know, is doing to the sound. So I think it's good emulation, considering, you know, it could get upgraded as well if there's something that's not working right. It is maybe taxing on the CPU, that we can find out. All right, so 17%, this thing better work. 17 leaning into the 18, that's kind of deep. All right, so, you know, just so we know now, it's 17% of my, I mean, I don't think there's many plugins that go that deep. I'm thinking they're gonna optimize that a little bit, but who cares? I mean, if it works, right? Let's take a look at what I said, right? The 44.1 into 44.1. This is correct, and these I like, so this is fine. You know, we just peeked into the circuitry of these plugin. So again, I think, you know, this pretty much wraps it up. We kind of ran it through a test, but we also took a look at what the functions would do. And yes, it's kind of a bad way to spoil stuff, but I think in Nebula4 Lab, we're looking for that specific approach to some of the libraries because of how third-party developers are different, you know, in developing, in approaching the craft of these piece of software and how to capture the devices. So it's even more important that we kind of create a common element, and I kind of like that we kicked it off with a plugin that is really, really brand new, and that a lot of people are now asking themselves whether or not they should buy it. What I care the most about is that, you know, no matter what kind of harmonic saturator or plugin you're gonna find yourself into, you know what kind of features I would like. And maybe you don't care, but now you do. So thank you very much for watching me as usual, and we're gonna see each other in maybe another video, probably in the Nebula4 Lab. What do you say? Thank you very much. Ciao.